Welcome to another session of our teaching, The Law of God's Kingdom, Understanding the Sermon on the Mount. And today's session will be entitled Getting to the Heart. And we'll be focusing on Matthew chapter 5, verse 21 to 32. I'm going to begin by reading Matthew 5:20 again. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. The religious leaders, the scribes and Pharisees, viewed Jesus with suspicion because of his association with sinners. To them, he was compromising the standards of the law, the standards of righteousness. That's why they called his authority into question. Certainly, this couldn't not be the Messiah, as some were suggesting. They even accused Jesus of breaking the law. Throughout the Gospels, we see them ask questions. Yes, there were some genuine questions, but many of them were testing questions, testing to see which rabbinical school he supported, which side he was on. Are you for them or for us? And many of the questions were to trick him, to cause him to say things that would allow them to accuse him, particularly later in his ministry. But actually, Jesus sets a higher standard. He does not break the law or compromise the law. He sets a higher standard. He gives a series of examples in this passage that we're going to be looking at. He gives a series of examples and he states what the law says. And then he says, but I say to you. We looked at that last time. By making that statement, but I say to you, he's not adding to the rabbinical debate. Whose side are you on? How do you view things? But he's giving a final word, that final judgment on the law that only the Messiah can give, that final interpretation. If we approach these verses as a clarification or an application of particular laws, and for one, it doesn't give the full law, so there'd be a lot missing, but also we'd simply be adding to that rabbinical debate of the time. Yes, we do need to consider application. We do need to live out the words of Jesus. But this isn't about a greater legalism. So what are these verses about? Jesus' standard actually seems humanly impossible. It's been interpreted, it's been seen as a law for the future kingdom, not applicable now. Not expected now because nobody can live up to that standard. Or it's simply been seen as an example of an unattainable standard to show us our need for forgiveness. You can't do it anyway. You need God's forgiveness. God is too holy. That's been the interpretation of the reformers, many evangelicals. And yes, that is true. That is true to a degree. God's holiness seems unattainable. But Jesus does call his followers to do these sayings. He says not only to hear, but to do. He says it in this verse that we just read, but he also says it at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. He says that those who hear the words and do them are like a man who builds his house on a rock. Those who simply hear and don't do, what they build is built on sand and is destroyed when the flood comes. So both is true. But Jesus does call his followers to do. Well, what is the purpose of this teaching then? Well, it's a brief explanation, really. It's not a full discussion of the different interpretations. We could do a whole Christian Gemara, like the rabbis discuss everything in detail. We could write another commentary, but there are so many commentaries, and I do encourage you to read commentaries. What I want to focus on is really the spirit of this, getting to the heart. Matthew 5:21 to 22, Jesus equates anger with murder. I'm just going to read that. You have heard it was said, to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of judgment. Whoever says to his brother, Raca, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Acts of sinfulness begin in the heart. It's the heart that needs change. Murder already begins in the heart. It begins with anger. The heart is what needs change. Jeremiah says that the heart is desperately wicked. In Jeremiah 7 verse 9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And God, speaking about the new covenant through Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 31:33, he says, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The problem is the heart, and the heart needs changing. God will put his law in the hearts of his people under his new covenant. Similarly, God tells Ezekiel in Ezekiel 11:19, then I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within them, and take the stony heart out of their flesh and give them a heart of flesh. Actually, this is repeated in chapter 36:26. It's always important when things are repeated in the Bible, they really need to be taken note of. God doesn't repeat things for nothing. This time it's repeated with you. Before it was them. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. When all is fulfilled, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. This is speaking about the new covenant, speaking about the messianic age, the age to come. But actually, with the arrival of Jesus, with the coming of Jesus, the messianic age has arrived. He is the Messiah. He says the kingdom has come. With the arrival of Jesus and the subsequent coming of the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, to live, to dwell in God's people, those who have been forgiven and cleansed and prepared to receive God's Spirit. Paul talks about his struggle between what he wants to do and what he does. What the law says, the law, he says, is good. The law is righteous. It's God's law. I want to follow it. I want to do good, but my flesh says something else. There is another law in my body, in my flesh. A constant struggle going on. But there is an answer. Paul describes this in the following chapter. So Romans 7, going on to Romans 8, I'm just going to read verses 3 to 4. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God did. God's initiative. God did by sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh on account of sin. He condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteous requirement of the law might be fulfilled in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Let's take a look at the examples that Jesus gives. Back to verse 21, murder, but I'm going to read from 21 to 26 this time. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, shall be in danger of the council. But whoever says, you fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Agree with your adversary quickly while you're on the way with him, lest your adversary deliver you to the judge hand you over to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Assuredly, I say to you, you will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny. So what is Jesus saying? What is he saying? Anger without a cause. Actually, earlier manuscripts don't include without a cause. That's why some Bible translations do not include that. But putting that aside, anger. He who is angry with his brother shall be in danger of the judgment. The judgment here refers to a local court for minor crimes. bit like the magistrates maybe in our legal system. But whoever calls his brother Raka, empty-head, stupid, brainless, is in danger of the council, a higher court, a more serious crime. There's an increment here. Anger to actually pronouncing a curse, pronouncing a person to be empty-headed, stupid, in danger of the crown court. But whoever calls his brother fool, the word more, means a godless person. As in Psalm 14:53, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. That person who says that, who regards another person as godless, as worthless, God's creation as worthless, is in danger of hellfire. Hellfire, the word actually used here is Gehenna. Gehenna was the place where rubbish was burnt outside of Jerusalem. Comes from the former Gehinnom. Gehinnom was the valley of Hinnom, where children were sacrificed, burnt offerings to the gods. Later became the rubbish burning place. Well, Jesus goes on to say, leave your gift at the altar. Sort out your differences first. Forgiveness and reconciliation to Jesus has higher priority than bringing a gift, an offering, worship. In fact, worship and relationship with others are inseparable because God is love. God's nature is love. Our relationship with him is based on love, receiving his love and giving his love, and on forgiveness. We are his because we are forgiven, not because of our own righteousness. Our relationship with him is based on restoration, reconciliation, and that's the kind of people we need to be. People of forgiveness, restoration, reconciliation. Blessed are the peacemakers. Jesus then goes on to the issue of adultery. Verse 27. You have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it from you. For it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Of course, Jesus is not playing down the actual act of adultery. But again, he's addressing the fact that sin begins in the heart. Adultery is an outward action which is conceived in the heart. It begins in the heart. In the New Testament, James says in James 1:14-15, but each one of you is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. Don't blame God, don't blame the devil. He says when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed by that desperately wicked heart, that deceitful heart. Then when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. It's the heart that needs changing. It's the heart that needs healing. And Jesus comes to do that through forgiveness and through his Spirit. So really drastic statements. Hell simply for lusting, plucking out one's eye, cutting off one's hand. Of course, plucking out your eye, cutting off your hand isn't going to change anything. This is a hyperbole to illustrate the seriousness of sin and God's standard of righteousness, God's requirement. God's standard of righteousness is a righteousness of the heart. It already begins in the heart where only God sees. Others may not see, but God sees, even that which is conceived in the heart. Righteousness is a matter of the heart, and it's the heart that must be changed. Just as Jeremiah and Ezekiel already prophesied, God would give a new heart, write his laws in our hearts. Let's go back to the text, Jesus' teaching. verses 31 and 32. Furthermore, it has been said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever divorces his wife for any reason except sexual immorality causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a woman who is divorced commits adultery. So Jesus leads straight on from lust, from adultery, to the issue of divorce. Divorce, reasons for divorce, justification for divorce was just as controversial then as it is now. Many discussions, many debates, and many different views. The rabbis' debate concerned the reasons for divorce. When is it legitimate? When is it allowed? But Jesus goes right back to the original purpose. Divorce was never God's plan. They become one. Man and woman become one, never to be separated. In other passages, Matthew 19, for example, but also, of course, in Mark and Luke, Jesus elaborates more. When asked by the scribes and Pharisees why the law of Moses provides for divorce, why is there a certificate for divorce? Why did Moses allow that? Jesus replies, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. The purpose of this provision, the purpose of a certificate of divorce, was to enable a woman who was put away by her husband to start a new life. Actually to survive, because without a husband she could hardly survive in that society. There was no opportunity for her to earn a living or anything. A woman depended on a man, on a husband. And this gave her the opportunity for a new life. It's God's mercy. Again, Jesus doesn't get into the argument about the reason for divorce. Yes, he does mention, except it be for sexual immorality, porneia in the Greek. Porneia is not the same thing as adultery, because of course for adultery under the law, the penalty was death by stoning. Porneia must refer to relationships prior to marriage, extra, premarital relationship. In a sense, entering the marriage under false pretenses, for the false pretense of being a virgin. That's what he's referring to here. Of course, in those days, that was very strictly observed and still is in many societies, the expectation. Jesus gets to the heart. The heart. Divorce, broken relationship was never God's purpose. True love, his love, keeps the relationship together. True love forgives. True love overlooks. True love reconciles. Again, in practice, Jesus picks people up where they're at. He doesn't judge them. He picks them up where they're at, because in a fallen world, there are many broken lives. In fact, most people we come across have broken lives. But Jesus comes to mend, to heal, not to condemn. And so should we be. So should we, his people, the kingdom citizens, pick people up where they are at and bring them to Jesus, where they can receive healing and restoration. All the law is ultimately fulfilled in love, loving God and loving others. And true unconditional love comes only from God. It is not in us, it comes by his Spirit. He writes his law of love into our hearts. That's why those who live by the Spirit, those who walk the way of Jesus, the good way of Jesus, the way of the cross, they are the ones who fulfill God's law, ultimately through love. The next session we'll look at the remainder of chapter 5. Jesus covers the matters of swearing of oaths, vengeance, and love. Everything is fulfilled in love. Join us again. The Lord bless you.